So that's excellent diversity. Thank you so much. And Loretta, while we've got you, would you like to give us a little brief introduction about yourself?
Yeah, thank you. So Loretta here, I'm training coordinator at Safe System Solutions. So you have received lots of emails from me. So thank you for being here today and reading my emails and logging into the learning management system. But I'm your point of contact, and the email is training@safesystemsolutions.com.au. So if you can't make a session, or if you have technical issues or any sort of admin related questions in regards to the learning management system, please email me. I'll do my best to help out. I guess with general sort of technical issues with the Zoom, I always say log out, log back in, and that usually works. Otherwise, I'll try and help if I can. But during the actual webinars, if you can please use the chat function, as I can see a lot of you have already, so thank you. So there is a couple of different ways. So the chat function, there is also the Q&A. So the Q&A function allows you to ask those questions related to the content of what Max or Ken will be running through. And what I'll do is do my best to answer those, and obviously consult with Max most of the time and Ken throughout the sessions. And we'll try and get those questions answered as best we can. Otherwise, I'll always get back to you at some point. If you did want to actually talk, because as Max mentioned, it's a webinar, but you can raise your hand. So there is a little thing there, you can raise your hand and we will then allow you to actually talk, and then, yeah, lower the hand. But the other thing is with, technical failure, there is in the learning management system, the presentation is available to download. So there's a PDF version there of the slides that we're running through in each module. So you can just follow on, if you can't see the screen or anything happens in that regard, you can use the PDF. But yeah, like I said, training@safesystemsolutions.com.au if you have any questions for me.
Thank you,
Thanks.
Loretta. And it is a wonderful background I see there. Is there any
Ah,
particular
yeah.
reason for that excitement?
I forgot to mention that, didn't I? I'm going to be handing out like Batman and Superman, and who else have we got? Winnie the Pooh. If you get involved, ask great questions, answer anything that Max sort of says, but we're going to hand out prizes. So, but they're not the prizes I'll be giving you. I will be in the background tracking anyone that does win a prize when Max does allocate you with winning a prize. So I'll keep track in the background, and then we will mail it out to you. So please get involved, interact using the chat functions. Yeah, that's all we ask. It's probably the best way to win a prize is get involved.
Excellent. And we also do some trivia as well at the start of each session. So if you do want to log in early for our next session and all the following sessions, Loretta has got some famous trivia. And if you're able to answer Loretta's
About
tough questions,
famous.
yeah, or infamous, sorry.
Yes, but yeah, please log on as you did today. If you get in early, we'll run some trivia before the actual start time. So yeah, that way we can kick on, on time and keep to our schedules as well. Yeah,
Perfect.
thanks.
Thank you very much, Loretta.
Thank you.
I already mentioned this. We've got a learning management system, or the LMS as we refer to it. Just an online platform where all of our resources are. You do need access to this. So if you haven't seen this, it's not familiar, please reach out to the training team because you do need access. That's where all the coursework and assignments are. We don't do anything via emails because you could imagine if we've got hundreds of participants emailing with the assignments, things get messy. So it's all online, very similar to kind of university LMSs as well. So if you've been within that space, it might seem familiar. But yeah, make sure you've got your details in there. Sorry, Loretta.
No, that's all right. I might just add on that. So you would have received an email, in order to get your login details for the LMS. Sometimes it may go to your spam folder. So if you haven't received the email and you're freaking out thinking, what are we talking about? Please check your spam or your junk mail. If that fails, let me know and I'll look into it and get you logged in. But I do see that people have already logged in. So thank you, and introduce themselves. So there is a little introduction page where you can sort of, just like you did on the chat today, have a quick hello and yeah, where you're from, and that's it. Thanks. Well, we'll go through more at the end of this session.
Beautiful. Thank you so much. I'll give myself a little introduction as well. So my name is Max McArdle. I'm active transport lead at Safe System Solutions. So heavily involved in active transport, cycling projects, pedestrian projects, things like that. Development, strategic type projects, as well as delivery and design. Really passionate within the cycling infrastructure space. I also deliver another cycling infrastructure training course, but in combination with that, regularly involved in road safety audits, all aspects. There's certain skills that I acknowledge I'm stronger at, and others that I would rely on colleagues to help me out with. So like anything to do with like very, very detailed roundabout design or something like that, I would confer with colleagues within that space that have got more experience, and instead only kind of champion the subject matter that I feel really comfortable within. So keep that in mind with the road safety audit as you go on to actually complete your own RSAs. There's no expectations for you to be the subject matter expert in every single aspect of traffic engineering, transport networks, and things like that. You may have to rely on other people's skill sets, and that's okay. Bit more background about myself. I started at Vic Roads or DTP. I've also worked on site. I used to be a site engineer for different construction companies. So kind of got that hands-on construction delivery background as well. Pretty confident with how things are actually built in the real world. And then moved into Safe System Solutions about 5 years ago because I was just interested in getting more involved in the consultancy space and interested in road safety in particular. So just gave Ken a phone call and kind of started the next week, which was very exciting for me. Ken is our principal engineer. He is very, very experienced within road safety and is kind of a leader within this space. He actually helped develop the Austroads Guide to Road Safety Auditing. So what we're going to run through today, like Ken was one of the people writing the document, so incredibly familiar with the ins and outs of it and why certain things are phrased as they are. Between us, you're more than welcome to ask the most complex, tricky questions because I'm sure we'll be able to answer them or point you in the right direction. So by all means, keep the questions coming. You don't need to wait for me or Ken to say, has anyone got any questions? Just chuck them in the Q&A because, we might move on to other subjects by then and you might forget and things like that. So if you've got a question, please do just chuck it in while it's fresh in your mind. But Ken and I will be running through the course for this road safety auditor program. I'll be doing Monday and Wednesday, and Ken will do the remainder from memory. So yeah, will be your two kind of go-to for any technical queries. Now we've got this little strategy here to make sure that you're all kind of giving us 100% with your focus and not trying to hammer out some emails in the background or not making a new DJ playlist or anything like that while we're having a prezzo. So what we've done is we've included our friend here. This fellow is called Wally the Wombat, and Wally is going to sporadically appear in a variety of different slides in today's session. And your job is just to keep a tally of how many times you spot Wally. Okay, so just grab a piece of pen and paper or whatever like that. And you just need to do a little count of how many times you spot Wally. It's just to make sure that we're getting eyes on this screen here. This one is not included in the count. So your current Wally tally is 0, but you will see him popping up throughout today's session. One of the questions in today's quiz will be, how many times did you see Wally? Which is how we kind of, I guess, track that, whether there was any other influences or any distractions during today's conversation. So make sure you're looking out for Wally. We do have some key benchmark competency requirements, because at the end of this course, I hope that you all go on to become registered road safety auditors. We need to ensure that all of the content that we're covering, specifically the process that we are covering, has been well articulated and it's been well understood. So we've set some benchmark requirements so that we have confidence in the people that we are training are suitable to become registered road safety auditors. So we need you to actually attend these webinar sessions, 4 out of 5 live, please, but obviously encourage you to come to all of them live. As I mentioned before, if you do need to duck out, you've got the option of watching the recording in your own time when it becomes available. So we tend to post the recording on the same day, maybe later on that day or the next day, you'll see it up on the LMS. There'll just be a link that will take you to a YouTube of our recording there. We need to complete all the coursework. So we've got quizzes, we've got assignments, and we've also got to get you to do kind of a bit of a mock audit at the end as well. We're going to go through all of that bit by bit rather than tell you all of the coursework now. So at the end of each session, we'll run through exactly what is expected of you in order to complete the coursework. We do have an average 80% pass mark on all quizzes and assignments, which is very high. There's no shying away from that. That's quite a high fail rate. If you're getting 79%, that's not good enough. But the reason that we've set that is because we're not going to be testing you on, really, really complex sightline calculations or, reviewing longitudinal plans and doing lots and lots of detailed analysis or anything like that. That's not really the point of this course. We want to make sure that you understand what a road safety audit is, what the process for undertaking the audit is, what are the do's and don'ts, what are some common type of findings. But you're not going to really be able to walk out of here and have that kind of 10-year experience and know the ins and outs of everything to do within traffic engineering. There's just not enough time to go through all of that content. So we are going to focus it on the process. The reason that we do have that higher 80% pass mark as well is because it just gives us confidence that those going out there, they really do have the skills to be road safety auditors. If you are not meeting that on your first attempts, rest assured you've got up to 3 attempts on all of the coursework, so all the quizzes and the assignments and things. And if you're not hitting that mark and you're not sure why, we do provide one-on-one coaching. So you can give me a call. I'm more than happy to just run you through why you might not have got that grade on the first attempt, give you some pointers, and then hopefully get you over the line the next time going through. We do see it as a bit of a failure on ourselves if we're not getting people to be able to successfully pass this course. It's our kind of responsibility as trainers to be able to clearly articulate all of this content. So we don't want to fail anyone. We don't want you to fail. Please pick up the phone if you're struggling with any of the content. Okay, we already spoke about this. Loretta will be handing out some wonderful prizes. You're able to get some prizes if you answer some of the questions that I pose, or if you actually just ask me questions. That's great. But also come on early. We've got trivia as well. You have more chance to win a prize. But enough of the admin logistics. I think it's good that we just get stuck into some content. Otherwise, we'll run out of time. So today's focus is all going to be on the introduction to a road safety audit, and I suppose what that term actually means. We'll go through the definition of a road safety audit. We'll talk about how this actually fits into a project's entire life when you would consider undertaking a road safety audit. We'll have a chat about what are the differences between an RSA and a black spot investigation. 2 separate things, both are very valuable, but have separate functions there. We'll discuss the risk rating methodology that is used within an RSA and briefly touch on the SAFE system. A lot of people here probably heard the SAFE system or have got some interaction with the SAFE system. So we're just going to give you the high level understanding of it. But if you're not certain of that, we do run other SAFE system courses, which has more information on that. Determine the kinetic energy threshold. This is a really, really jargon term that is quite commonly used within this space. Kinetic energy threshold is basically all about, how much force can the human body withstand? There's only so much the human body is designed to be able to cope with before it breaks or before it results in a fatal outcome. So that's what that kinetic energy threshold refers to. Just a little bit of jargon. And finally, we'll have a chat about how we can categorize RSA findings and match them up with SAFE system alignment. So there's quite a bit of content to get through, and I'll do my best to keep everything on schedule. First thing I'll make a note of is the Austroads Guide to Road Safety Part 6. So this was the one that Ken worked on. That is the current one that we will be going through. If you've got previous versions that are, printed lying around the office or anything like that, just make a note they've been superseded because you should be referring to the most current guidelines. There's slight differences in between all of them, but definitely want to make sure that you're using the latest version of the guidelines. Austroads does permit people to download all of their publications for free, so you don't need to pay for that. You just need to sign up to their platform, create an account, and then you've got access to all of theirs. So very, very useful resource. If you haven't already logged onto Austroads, make sure you've signed up there. The broader objective of the course is to outline the process of the RSA. I think that's really, really important point that I've talked a few times now. It's really the process that we're going to be hammering home during this course content, just so you're very familiar with what are the steps to undertake the RSA. Got to make sure that you understand that you've got the basic skills to be able to interpret RSAs or deliver RSAs on your own behalf. Be able to understand what are some of those common issues. Reflect that RSAs are not just for general passenger vehicles. You can do RSAs for motorcyclists, for heavy vehicles. You can focus on pedestrians. You can focus on buses, whatever it is. Recently, I completed an RSA on a shared path. So I was looking at the risks specifically for pedestrians and for people that ride bikes through there. So completely away from the road area, separated shared path, but you can conduct a road safety audit within that space. It's a bit of a weird name to say a road safety audit when you're actually not auditing anything that's on the road. I'll admit that, but the process still is the same. So just important to acknowledge that. Yeah, want you to encourage RSAs as kind of one tool that can be used within your repertoire, and also have this broad understanding of the reason that you might be implementing them. Got this big, important looking graph or matrix, something here. This is out of the Austroads Guide. On the top row is basically the life cycle of a project, all the way from the planning and strategic idea of putting in something new to actually developing more detailed plans and then eventually constructing it and evaluating its success and things like that, and then finally maintaining the asset and things like that. And this piece here just is demonstrating that there are lots and lots of different, I don't know what you'd refer to it as, different tools, different frameworks that work across a project's life cycle. The road safety audit, and I think I've got it's just a highlighted text box there, is most beneficial where you are actually starting to develop plans. So you've actually got something to talk to. It's not just like a business case and starting to do a road safety audit on a business case. That would be quite challenging. Instead, it's when you've actually got a plan, you can see where things are changing, you can make comments on that. Or after things have been constructed or the existing conditions, you're actually going out there and conducting road safety audits within that space. That's when you've got your most effect for RSAs. Anything prior to that, it just becomes a little bit too high level and not necessarily going to be able to ascertain or glean any information, any tangible information from the RSA. I'm not going to go through all of those ones there. You might be familiar with some of these other tools or frameworks like safety and design, movement and place, things like ANRAM and OSRAP, all of those types of tools as well. They've got their own specific function and purpose. We're not going to be covering them in this course though. First thing I wanted to start off with, which is a common misconception about road safety audits. It's that an RSA is not a safety review. So it's not just going through the relevant standards, guidelines, supplements, and just checking, yep, the sightline requirements met. Has it got the right vertical grade? There are no crests. Is it the right super elevation? That's not an RSA. That would be performed during design checks and things like that. So that's the first thing to know. It is not a standards review. Additionally, standards do not necessarily mean that you've got a safe outcome. Standards are often there as minimum requirements. So just because you build something to standards, that's completely up to code, that ticks every box, does not mean that there are no safety risks associated with that design. It's really, really important to note that. So you could have a design that's completely compliant in all Australian standards, all Austroads guides, all the supplements, completely compliant, but it still has safety risks. The job of a road safety auditor is really just to focus on those safety risks. So you can even, within a road safety audit report, you can say, I know that this meets, the Austroads sightline calculation requirements, but I still think this is a risk. You are absolutely entitled to do that as an auditor because you are there for your experience as a safety auditor. You're only there for that lens, and it acknowledges that standards do not ensure that safety will always be achieved. Really, really important to understand that. I'll give you an example. This was a truck that has crashed into a gantry column, and the barrier system that was used adjacent this carriageway was a wire rope type of barrier system. I might throw out my first question to the group. We'll see if we've got any real technical people on board. If this was a test level 3 barrier, TL3 barrier, what vehicle weight would have been used as part of the testing procedure? So if this was a TL3 barrier system, test level 3 barrier system, what vehicle weight are we really trying to accommodate with that? I've got 2270 kilograms, which is correct. Excellent. We'll give a prize out there, Loretta. So 2.27 tons is what a TL3 barrier system is really tested for. A TL4, that's the next regime up, that is a 10-ton vehicle. Okay, so a 10-ton vehicle, I think I've got an image on the next slide, looks something like that. Okay. If during the testing procedure, this wire rope is able to safely contain that 10-ton vehicle, then it gets the tick, yep, this is an appropriate product to be able to use on the network. But if I flip back here and I look at this vehicle, this looks like a B double, which is 25 ton, 30 ton. And we know that that barrier system has not been designed or approved for vehicles of that weight. So if you were to look at this from a standards perspective, you may be like, okay, I know that this specific environment requires a TL3 barrier system. I know that this product is an approved TL3, approved product. So we're going to install that. And that gets the tick of approval. A road safety auditor would come in and say, hang on, isn't this going to be used by heavy vehicles? Isn't this on the B double network? So surely we could anticipate that if one of those heavy vehicles were to run off road, that barrier system may fail. And that's the type of auditor thinking that you kind of need to be thinking about as you get stuck into these types of projects. Another thing that you might be considering if you were looking at an example like this is if it was struck, as it is now, what is the failure of this gantry mechanism? Because if that is to then collapse onto the live carriageway, you've got this secondary crash that is occurring that could also have quite serious outcomes. So auditing does have very, very broad applications, and it can be very, very useful to have team members that have got different perspectives, different backgrounds, different skill sets to help think about these issues. I'll give you another example of, I suppose, an instance where you may be meeting standards, but you're not achieving, or you are potentially still occurring that safety risk. And I'm going to zoom in on this section because it's pretty tricky to see. This is a new construction and duplication of an existing carriageway. And if we have a look at where we've got this red rectangle here, that is a vehicle that's in a through lane. Right? You can see by the arrow there that that's traveling through. However, as they head past this intersection, they get led into a right turn traffic lane. So that's referred to as a trap lane because, presumably this motorist may have wanted to continue straight. They thought they were in a through lane. Instead, they have been forced to perform a turning movement when perhaps that's not what they wanted. Quite common, does occur on freeways as well, where you're in the left lane in that instance and you'll think you're just going through, but you have to turn left. Trap lanes, quite common. There's no standards or guidelines or supplements that I've seen that actually says you can't do this, because there's an acknowledgement that it's very, very difficult in constrained locations to be able to mess with like the stand-up lanes and things like that. So it's kind of a bit on the fence within current guidelines to be like, well, you shouldn't really do it, but we acknowledge that it has to occur sometimes. From a safety perspective, though, you don't have to worry about what the guidelines say. You can just be like, I'm concerned that a vehicle heading through here wants to continue through and is then just going to force themselves back into the through traffic lane, increasing the risk of those kind of side swipe crashes and things like that. So although that may meet current guidelines and things like that, you are absolutely within your right as an auditor to be like, I still think this is a safety risk and we should be looking at what can we do to mitigate this as a risk. So that one's quite a common one as a trap lane. I'm going to show a video here. This one is of a car crash, although all occupants kind of walked away from this one here. And while you're watching it, what I want you to get, what I want you to focus on is what elements of the road environment perhaps led to this type of crash occurring. So what types of features of the road environment may have led to this type of collision, okay? The way that it starts from a, back of the vehicle, and you can see a vehicle that's oncoming, and then it goes to the front of the vehicle and it flips around. So I'll show you the video. So this is obviously watching in reverse. And we can see a vehicle that's oncoming now. So this is the vehicle that will be involved in a collision. And it's going to flip around to the front now. That's the vehicle. And that's the collision. I'll watch it again and ask you in the chat to pop down any road environment factors that may have led to this type of collision. So road environment, like the built environment, the way that this carriageway looks and feels. All right, so pop your ideas in the chat. I'm going to have a little drink of water. Difficulty in identifying the upcoming intersection. Yes. Poorly signed, perhaps. There is a curve, slight curve, bend before the intersection as well. The give way sign hidden behind the other side. Yep, that's a really, really common thing to occur, particularly where you've got lots and lots of signs. You do have that cluttering effect, and you can have the front sign blocking all the other signs there. Light pole hazard not protected. I'm glad that you mentioned that. I'll come back to that in a second. The straight two-lane road allows higher speeds, absolutely. So it does feel like you can travel higher operating speeds with those kind of generous lane widths, multiple lanes. You wouldn't really be doing those speeds if it was like a narrow residential street, because it doesn't feel like you should be. Poor sight lines, no warning, the T intersection ahead. Yep, absolutely. No slowdown signs, speed limit near the intersection. Yeah, okay. So we're already picking up lots and lots of brilliant findings. All of these are completely valid risks that we could then incorporate into our road safety audit report. I can also see lots of people have already identifying solutions. So things like improved signage, even speed reductions or things like that. Already think about the recommendations, which I love to see as well. There's a couple that I wanted to add here, which is if you look at the utility poles and the street lighting poles, because they go over this intersection, we've got this see-through type effect. And that occurs when you've got this kind of parallel common roadside furniture that's occurring prior to the intersection and after the intersection. In other words, some motorists may think they can just head straight through there because it kind of leads them into that. Definitely more of a risk, or more common, you'd see that in rural scenarios, where you've got that kind of row of trees or row of utility poles that are in that one line. It can have that effect. So that's referred to as a see-through effect. It also kind of, if you kind of look at as you're approaching this, it kind of looks like a roundabout as well, just the way that it's set up. So that's another thing that perhaps the driver may have misinterpreted. They thought they were entering a roundabout, and they were just assuming they had right of way there. But the other note that I thought was interesting to pick up there was the light pole that was crashed into, and you can see that it kind of just sheared off. It was just disappeared, and that was actually likely the intent of, and part of this design, because what would likely occur during the design of this project was, well, it is possible that we may have motorists that fail to yield here and could potentially crash into this pole. So rather than make it like a fixed hazard, let's make it frangible, or a slip-based pole, which Jesse has just mentioned there. We'll give a prize out to the slip-based pole there. And what that is designed to do is, as you strike it, the bolts are designed in a way that as soon as it's got a specific amount of force, it is going to shear off that plane. So rather than crashing into a thick static pole, you're able to dissipate some of that energy and decelerate with more time. So there's lots and lots of good conversations there. That one was just the pole there that we spoke about, and that one shifting off there. This is actually me inspecting a slip-based pole. So that is the slip base kind of collar. That's how it's installed. You don't want them installed too high above the ground, because then it creates a snagging risk. In other words, if the collar's up there, then you might just hit this section here and potentially have a rigid object there. Similarly, if it's too low, you've got some maintenance issues for getting into those bolts and things like that. So there is an actual kind of tolerance associated with the slip-based pole. As part of this audit that I was undertaking, I had a little kind of little cheat sheet, I guess you could call it. But that's like a little box, and if the slip-based pole plane was within that box, then it was at an adequate height. So that's just a mention of the slip-based pole. There are scenarios, though, where you may not recommend slip-based types of facilities or anything like that. And they could be areas where you've got pedestrians, because it is designed to shear off, it's designed to fall down, and you don't want those things falling down and hitting pedestrians. Nor if you've got trams which have catenary wires, or overhead wires in general, you don't want to create kind of secondary impacts. So generally, more rural environments is where you'd be looking to implement your slip-based poles, or areas where there's not high pedestrian activity. There is a pole type out there, which looks like this one. Anyone in the chat know the name, the term of this type of pole? So this one is more designed to kind of, I don't know, huddle the car. That's a little bit too optimistic. This one's kind of absorbing the force of the vehicle, and rather than shearing off and slipping away, it's trying to contain that vehicle into this space. It's an example of a frangible pole, but frangible is kind of like the umbrella term. You've got slip-based, and then you've got this type of pole as well. Oh, impact absorbing pole. There it is in the chat. There we go. We'll give a prize out there, Loretta. Impact absorbing pole. So these are a bit more common in urban environments, where you do want to, ensure that it's not just a fixed, rigid object. It is designed to kind of deflate on itself, to fall upon itself and then caress the vehicle so as not to shear onto the carriageway or onto the pedestrian areas and things like that. This is quite technical, I understand. So if people do want more information about the dimensions or about the different types of poles that we've created little cheat sheets for you. So in the PDF, if you click on those slides there, it'll just take you to, I guess, a technical note that has got some more information of these items, just so you've got a reference for some of the information that I was telling you there. Another common misconception to do with road safety audits is whether it is kind of proactive or a reactive thing. And should we be looking at crash history? So a road safety audit is proactive because it's going out there with an audit team and saying, all right, what are the risks associated with this design, or what are the risks associated with these existing conditions, and what types of crashes could occur or would we expect to occur with this environment that I'm looking at. So it is proactive. A black spot investigation, it actually waits for the trauma to occur. So if you've got multiple, fatal and serious injuries occurring at a particular intersection, that then might flag that this is a black spot. So it's a reactive process because it's waiting for the trauma to occur before actually investigating it. So in that sense, the crash history is imperative for black spot investigations because you're relying on that trauma. For a road safety audit, though, it's not a requirement. You do not need to have the crash history as part of doing a road safety audit. It might be useful, if you look at the crash history and it's all the same time of day, maybe it's during school hours or something like that. Perhaps as you're doing a road safety audit at that location, you would go there during school hours to see why is there a peak in crashes occurring during this time. So it could be useful as part of a road safety audit, but it's not a requirement. So you're welcome to do an RSA without having any knowledge of previous crashes that have occurred there. A few years ago, some economic geniuses analyzed some of the road safety audits that have been completed across various jurisdictions and decided to do a bit of a calculation for a benefit cost ratio. I'm sure some of you might have heard that term before, BCR. And for those projects where a road safety audit was conducted during the design stage, they acknowledged that a BCR of 36-1 was achieved. That is phenomenal. Another way to put that is for every dollar that you invest in a road safety audit, you get $36 back in benefits. And the benefit there is less people being seriously injured or killed, right? Because that, in an economist's mind, all of that has a cost. You've got a cost for someone to go to hospital. You've got a cost for not being able to tax that person anymore because they can't work or they're dead or something like that, or there's a payout. There's a cost for all of those things. And then there's a cost for the audit. And during the design stage, BCR 36-1, which is massive. We've got, huge train tunnel projects that would be lucky to have a BCR of 1.5 or 2 to 1 or something like that. So this is really, really significant. The BCR for existing conditions, so looking at an existing road environment and conducting a road safety audit, is about 6 to 1. And the reason that it's not as lucrative as the design stage is because once you've got the built environment, it's a little bit harder to be like, let's underground all of these power assets because they are fixed point hazards. That sounds great on paper, but the implications of that is millions of dollars, and that is quite a big discussion to have with your power suppliers and to be able to achieve that and things like that. So for existing roads, it's a little bit harder to be able to actually implement the recommendations. When you're actually designing things, it's a bit easier to be able to move things around, to underground assets, things like that. Loretta.
Thanks, Max. Just a question that's come through, just some clarification, please. So just about this 136 benefit cost ratio, is there detailed information about such computation, same as the 1.6 BCR for existing road?
Yes, so this was a research report. I can't tell you the title at the top of my head, but by all means, if you want to reach out, I'll be happy to provide that. Someone basically just did like a PhD within this to determine how effective road safety audits are, and this is the kind of figures that they computed. So it's been peer reviewed and things like that. So there's strong evidence to say that there is a lot of benefit in doing road safety audits. So what is a road safety audit? I could have started with this, but I like to get you thinking about road safety risks first, and then we can actually talk about the terminology itself. So we'll just go straight to the definition. Austroad says an RSA is a formal examination of a future road or traffic project or an existing road or road-related area in which an independent qualified team reports on the project's crash potential and actual safety performance, respectively. It's quite a long-winded definition, but a few points that I really want to mention here. I've just bolded. It is a formal examination. So you can't just be, doing an RSA on the back of your notebook while you're on your lunch break and then hand it in for the afternoon or something like that. No, it's got a bit more rigor than that. It is a formal process. You can do it for future designs. You can do it existing. All of that's valid. Does need to be independent. And what I mean by independent is if you were involved in the design of the project or you manage the design team or something like that, you should not be auditing that design. It is very, very hard to critique your own work. Even if you're drafting, a new LinkedIn post or something like that, you would be checking with someone else for any typos or errors or things like that. Because if you read things too often, you're too involved in it, you can miss things. So you're very, very important to be independent, just so you don't have that in detailed knowledge. The other reason it's important to be independent is if you were part of the project team, then you might have made certain, decisions associated with the design that you're well aware of. So I'll just take an example. You decided not to create a 3.3 meter traffic lane. Instead, you're going down to 3 meters because you know that it's going to be very, very hard to build 3.3 and get environmental permits to be able to do that. So you might know that as a designer. A road safety auditor doesn't have to think about that. They can just be like, this is a narrow traffic lane. I'm worried that there's going to be head-on crashes. This is a risk. Right? So it's good to have that independence so you can have someone just saying, this is the safety risks. Have you considered it? Very, very possible the design team are already aware of that. They know that that is a risk, but it's still important to record that as part of the RSA. Safe system. So, as I mentioned, I'm going to give you a brief introduction. We could spend days on this topic, but we've got these kind of four key pillars within the safe system, which are safer speeds. So that's, speed limits, operating speeds of vehicles, safer road users, making sure that people are not driving when they're fatigued or they're under the influence or things like that. Safer roads, safer roadsides as well. Just making sure that we're designing not just what the standards are saying, but what we actually think is the safest outcome. And of course, safer vehicles as well. So I've certainly noticed that vehicles are getting much, much smarter and they're able to predict if a collision is occurring. There's wonderful things happening within that space, but all of these elements need to work together to be able to achieve our aim of getting towards zero deaths and serious injuries on our transport network. So the key principles of the safe system include no death or serious injury. It acknowledges that people actually make mistakes. So we can't just be like, oh, well, take the example of the video that we watch. If we just said, no, we put the give way sign there and basically that ute driver shouldn't have done what they did, that was just their fault. We're well and truly moved away from that victim blaming approach. And instead we need to say, well, people will make mistakes. People will drive at high speeds, be under the influence. So what can we do within other elements of the safe system to reduce the risk of death and serious injury? It is a shared responsibility. So shared between all of us that are here today. We've got kind of the technical prowess and we've also got the ability to really influence what our transport network looks like. So we need to be accountable for that. And the decisions that we make need to be founded on safety. The final principle is that people are vulnerable. And what I mean by vulnerable is there's only so much force we can withstand before unfortunately we get bones that are broken or we have fatal outcomes. So we need to acknowledge that as well. Now, I'm going to do a halftime break, and during the halftime break, I'm going to give everyone a little quiz. You're not going to be marked on this quiz. It's just going to be a poll which will open up in Zoom and I'll open in your screen. And it's just some questions to check, if the content has come through just yet and things like that. I'm going to give everyone 4 minutes to complete this quiz. And then also just get up, have a cup of tea, have a stretch, and we'll come back here in 4 minutes and run through that poll. And Loretta, everyone share the poll. No stress if you didn't get around to it. I know everyone participated. True or false? It is false. Everyone agree with that? That's fabulous. You can audit your own design. No, that's false. So we already got that one right. Which of the following is not considered a formal element? Safe attitudes is not actually an element of the system. I know you want everyone to have a safe attitude, but it's not actually part of that graphic that we showed before. Which of these is not one of the common principles? Eliminate mistakes on the road is not. That's correct. We acknowledge that mistakes will happen. Final one was, bit of a curveball. What speed did Usain Bolt cross the finish line? It was 44 kilometers per hour. And the reason that we shared that one is actually relevant. So you might have seen this before if you've done other courses from us. What I've got along here is a graph which shows on the y-axis the probability of a fatality occurring. And along the x-axis, I've got collision speed or impact speed. And that is, in this instance, the speed that a vehicle is going when it collides with a pedestrian, or could also be a person riding a bike. Yeah? Now, our friend Usain Bolt, he was running about 44 kilometers per hour, which means if he were to suddenly stop at that speed, let's just say at the end of his running lane, there was a brick wall and he ran into that brick wall. For the average person, there's a 60% chance that kind of speed would result in a fatal. Usain Bolt is not quite the average person, though. He's got quite a bit of muscle. He could probably bounce back. It's likely he's going to survive that one. But just wanted to acknowledge that there is actually a bit of a relationship between how fast you can run and if you're going to be able to survive, if you were to suddenly hit a tree or hit a brick wall or something like that. And that's just evolution. Like, we're basically not really designed to go any faster than that. So our body has not been built to withstand any forces that are higher than that. Of course, we've got cars now that are able to move much, much faster than that. The human body has not developed in that time. So we've clearly got that, those issues there, those risks there with having higher impact speeds than what our human body is able to tolerate. I'll get rid of Usain Bolt. And what I wanted to mention here is at around the 10% mark is when this graph kind of really kicks up. It exponentially gets worse. And that is a 30 kilometer per hour collision speed. This is actually referred to as the safe system speed threshold or impact speed threshold, because it's basically saying any collision speed that's higher than that, it's becoming very likely that that's going to result in a fatality, which we're trying to avoid. I've got a video here of this gymnast who's demonstrating, what it could look like, running at full speed and then colliding with something and stopping abruptly. Now, this fellow broke a few ribs, but was able to get up, heal, live a completely normal life. And that's kind of what our bodies are able to withstand. But things that are faster than that, we're just not set up to be able to walk away from those types of things. So when we look at the collision speed with a pedestrian, we were just talking about that 30 kilometer per hour speed. If we look at the collision speed associated with an intersection crash, or specifically like the T-bone style crashes, cross intersection type crashes, you can see that the graph there kicks up at around the 50 kilometer per hour. Another way to phrase that is if we've got any intersecting roads where there's a possibility for a T-bone style crash to occur, we want to ensure that the collision speed is at 50 kilometers per hour or below, because above that is when the risk of the fatality is exponentially worse. The final crash type that we will look on is head-on collision. And the collision speed for this one here is 70 kilometers per hour. And just to confirm, that is both vehicles traveling at 70 kilometers per hour and they hit each other. So it's not 140 or anything like that. It's both vehicle speeds are 70 and they collide head on. If it's at that 70 kilometer per hour mark, it's a 10% probability of fatality, but beyond that, as speeds get higher, it becomes exponentially worse. So the key takeaways there are we've got these safe system threshold speeds. If it's a vehicle colliding with a pedestrian, or a cyclist, or also a motorcyclist, so we just kind of lump them together with vulnerable road user, the collision speed that you're focusing on is 30 kilometers per hour. If it's an intersection type crash, it's 50 kilometers per hour. If it's head on, 70 kilometers per hour. This kind of just surmises what I just went through there. The impact speed threshold. One that we didn't show on that graph there was a run-off road crash where it's possible for a vehicle to kind of yaw. Yawing is like when you're skidding out of control. And if they're crashing into the side of the vehicle with like a pole or a tree, doesn't take much speed at all for that to be fatal. So between 30 and 40 kilometers per hour. I'm sure you're all thinking, well, we have got roads that are much, much faster than these thresholds. And you're absolutely correct. But this is what we kind of base our judgment on as road safety auditors, because these are evidence. This is like empirical data that we can say, we know at these speeds, the risks are going to become exponentially worse. So this is what we can, place our foundation in. This is just a note to see how things have changed from the old RSA guidelines to the new. Basically, the new RSA model is thinking about the safe system tolerances, so those safe system speed thresholds that I mentioned there. And it also really discusses what are some recommendations that align with safe system principles. But we'll speak more about that. The previous one didn't reflect as much on the safe system as the current RSA model does. All right, got an example here of what could be written up as an audit finding, and I'm actually going to show you how you would write up this audit finding as well. And in purple is what's being proposed as part of this intersection. We can see that there is a left turn lane here. And the risk that is being articulated as part of this example is if you've got a vehicle that's kind of turning left here, you've got another vehicle that's on the hold line, ready to, turn right out of there or whatever. A vehicle in the through lane here could be hidden. So this vehicle may not be able to see past that left turning vehicle. So they could think, yep, I'm good to go. Think they've got the gap. And then that increases the risk of that intersection crash type. If you're not 100% sure what that means, that's okay. I've got some actual photos of what this means. You can see we've got a truck there in the distance that is in the left turn lane at this site. And we've got this vehicle here at the hold line or approaching the hold line. I'll go a moment forward in time and we've got the truck there again. This vehicle may assume, right, as soon as that Holden station wagon goes past, I'm good to go. But during that whole time, there was another car that was completely hidden by the truck. The term used for that risk is masking, wearing a mask, masking, or dynamic visual obstruction. Those are the two terms used there, right? So in this scenario, this was picked up as an audit finding, and this was actually written out to help clarify things. Now, the way that you write your audit findings, it conveniently follows a bit of a recipe. I'm going to get them all up there. The first part of your audit finding needs to clearly articulate what is the issue. So in this example, it's saying, there's an issue of dynamic visual obstruction. The second part of your audit finding needs to say, well, what crash type am I worried about? And the way that this is phrased is this increases the likelihood of right through side impact crashes. Or you could just say, cross intersection crash types. The next part of this recipe is to mention any risk factors. So anything that, increases this or exacerbates this as a risk. So in this instance, the volume of vehicles on both roads is low. So that reduces the likelihood. However, the proportion of larger vehicles turning left is high, which increases the risk of the dynamic visual obstruction occurring. So those are just, I guess, supporting arguments to how you've risk rated this. The one in purple, the final little sentence here, is not required. It's only if you know. So if you know any standards or guidelines that would support this treatment, or on the other hand, it doesn't meet standards and guidelines, by all means, you can include it there. So this is what I was talking about before. You can say the design is actually current and consistent with what we would currently do. However, as auditors, we're still concerned with this as a safety risk, right? So this is the recipe that you need to follow. Really, really important that you take a screenshot of this, or we've also got it in your PDFs and things like that, because you will have a go at actually writing up audit findings. And what you will be marked on is how well you are following this exact little recipe. All right, another question for the group. What is our definition of risk? It's actually not unique to traffic engineering or to road safety. It's used in a variety of industries. So you can have risk, financial risk, you can have political risk, you can have even triaging patients in a hospital. There's risks there and things like that. Anyone know the actual calculation, or what are the factors involved in defining risk? I've got L times S from Krishna, and that is 100% correct. So Loretta will give a prize out to Krishna there. It is likelihood times severity. Another way you might have heard that is frequency times consequence. They mean the same thing, but that's how we measure risk within road safety audits. This is taken out of the Austroads guides, and this is the matrix that you'll need to familiarize yourself with. I've just got one printed out. It's on my desk, so I always have it handy. But if we look along the likelihood, what we've got is something that's either a rare risk. So they've given you an indicative time frame. We expect this type of risk to kind of present itself every 7 years plus. Or on the other side of the chart, it's almost certain. In other words, it's going to happen 4 times a year. It's once per quarter. It's really, really common. So that's the scale of the likelihood. The severity goes from insignificant, it's just property damage, it's just like backing into the shopping trolley at the shopping center. It's insignificant. Versus the other side of the scale being a fatal outcome. And fatal is taking as death within 30 days of crash. The other thing I want you to note about this matrix, risk matrix, is the dotted line. Anything to the right of the dotted line has got the FSI in brackets, because it just stands for the fatal and serious outcome. That is beyond the safe system crash outcome thresholds. So it's beyond what we're able to withstand before it's going to result in a fatal or serious injury. The reason that's important is because if you've got a high FSI, we'll just take this one as an example, which is an unlikely but serious event, because that's got the FSI connotation, it's actually should be prioritized or should be looked at as more severe than a high, which is a moderate and possible. Because a moderate doesn't mean a serious or a fatal. And that's not really the focus of the road safety audit. So anything with the FSI in the brackets, they should be seen as kind of like a tier above and higher risk. So let's go back to our example there of, the dynamic visual obstruction occurring. And we actually need to spell out how we have risk rated this specific audit finding. So in this example, we're saying the likelihood of that dynamic visual obstruction occurring, and then it's actually going to result in that crash type that we've nominated. Well, because of the low traffic volumes, it's actually pretty unlikely that this will happen regularly. So the specific audit team has said this is a rare occurrence. This is a rare likelihood. So anything greater than 7 years is when we would expect this frequency. However, if this were to occur, the severity of this crash would be serious. And if I go back to my little table there for a rare and a serious, you'll see we've got rare there and we've got serious there. That is a medium FSI crash risk. And that's what we've got spelt out there in this audit table. So you've got the medium listed and then also the FSI, because as I mentioned, including the FSI, it adds a bit of power, a bit more weight to it. So that's how you actually risk rate the audit finding that you've written up. So every single audit finding that you write will have an associated level of risk. And to get that level of risk, you need to reflect on that table. What's the likelihood? What's the severity? What's the overall crash risk? All of that needs to be spelled out. You can't just put medium FSI. You need to say, what's the likelihood? What's the severity? Now, this is where things get a little bit interesting because we don't just leave it there. We also like, as part of doing a road safety audit, to recommend treatments to mitigate this as a risk. So what can we do here to reduce this as a risk? And I'll open that up to the chat if anyone wants to suggest any changes to this design that they could potentially think of to reduce this as a risk. You don't need to know the recommendations just yet. If you're not comfortable, that's fine. But if you do have one, we do have a separate column that goes next, which is your recommendations. And we've got these two categories of recommendations. One of them is referred to as primary, and the other category is supporting. A primary treatment will virtually eliminate the potential of fatal and serious injuries. So a primary treatment is basically, even if you've got someone that's, driving on their mobile phone and distracted, or someone that misses the million signs of the approaching intersection, even if all of those situations occur, we are not expecting for a fatal or serious injury to occur. Right? So that's a primary treatment. Some examples of a primary in this scenario that I've got here could be a roundabout. A roundabout are able to bring down speeds. They also have improved crash angles, so no longer going at like a T there, but instead more of an acute angle where you can kind of glance off each other. So a roundabout could be considered a primary intervention. Anything to bring down the speeds, like a raised platform at this intersection, to bring down speeds below that 50 kilometer per hour impact speed thresholds, could also be seen as a primary. Anything that doesn't, isn't expected to have the same effect as virtually eliminate, but is expected to improve things, could be considered a supporting treatment. So I'll have a flick through the chat here and let's see what we've got. We've got adding a buffer lane between the through and the left lane. Brilliant. That is absolutely relevant. And that would be considered a supporting treatment. Because even if the buffer is there, there's still a risk. Like it still exists. It's still possible to have that crash occur. Providing a channelized left turn, absolutely. That would also be supporting. Speed reduction through the intersection. Depending on what speed reduction is proposed, and also how it's managed, because just because you put up a sign doesn't mean that it's going to change the speed environment. That could potentially be primary though. We'll go back to this example though. So in the recommendations section, we've written down implement measures to reduce the speed and or angle of the impact at this location, such as through a roundabout. To highlight that this is a primary recommendation, in brackets, we just put the P, right? So then that says this recommendation with the P is primary. It's also really, really useful for a project team to not just have primary recommendations, because generally primary are much harder, much more expensive to do. So we also included, if this cannot be achieved, implement measures to improve sight lines, such as increasing the offset to the left turn lane, which we had the mention there before about adding the buffer, or relocating the hold line forward so that you've got increased visibility there. It's just a little diagram of what that buffer there looks like, and also implementing that increased hold line there. Little caveat here, which is to say, if we've got any friends from New South Wales on today's course, or you plan on doing any road safety audits in New South Wales, they do not do recommendations. Everywhere else in Australia, you are absolutely encouraged and entitled as a road safety auditor to put down your own recommendations. If you're in New South Wales, though, forget about it. They don't want to hear it. They don't do it. Just a jurisdictional difference there. So be mindful of that. If you are doing any RSAs there, you don't have to do any recommendations. They like to see their auditors purely bringing up the risk, and the project team can then say, that's the risk, what can we do? There you go. To be categorized as a primary treatment, it must either address the consequence or the possibility of a fatal or serious injury. This must include general human error. So it must also consider that people will make mistakes. People will run a red light. People will fall asleep at the wheel, things like that. So you need to also consider those scenarios as well. Final little section of an audit finding actually has a separate area where the project team or the person that has commissioned this road safety audit, they can respond. So they can actually write, yep, I agree with this finding and recommendation, and I am going to do the roundabout as suggested. So they've got a spot to write there. Or they could do, nope, I don't agree with the roundabout because, it's going to cost me $5 million and there's no budget to complete that. But instead, I will do those supporting treatments as recommended or something like that. Very, very important that this is filled out by the project team. So it's not just, here's the risks, here's the recommendations, and then there's no closing out. This is not meant to be just a checkbox exercise. It's not, oh, we have to do an RSA, so we're going to do one, we'll commission one. There we go, it's done, put it in the drawer. It's not the point of the RSA. It's to say, these are the risks. It is up for you now to own them and to be accountable and say, what are you going to do to mitigate those risks? Really important. I've got another example of a different crash audit finding. This one is to do with lane widths. The lane width shown in the right turn lane is 2.9 meters, which is quite narrow. I should have also mentioned that if you are doing any audit findings, I strongly, strongly, strongly recommend that you include a snip of the design so you can just clearly say, this is the right turn lane that I'm talking about. Because as soon as you say like the westbound approach, right turn lane, you know, the second one from the center median, it can become so convoluted and confusing. And you want to make it as easy as possible for the readers. So always include a diagram or an image of the design. Just take a snip just to make it easier for everyone. So this is saying that, yeah, that narrow right turn lane could create issues with vehicles in the same direction of traffic, especially if there's queuing, potentially increasing the risk of head-on, side swipe, or rear-end crashes. So we'd have to reflect on what are the different speed impact thresholds of those crash types. And within this example, the way that this was an old format I should mention, the way they've looked at it, they've first spelled out the audit finding. They've said, consider, reallocating the space so that we've got at least 3.3 meter wide traffic lanes. That's just another zoomed in section of it. But clearly trying to take the risk and then provide a recommendation that's absolutely relevant to that risk. So you've got narrow traffic lanes, recommendation, make them wider. There's probably a very good reason that those traffic lanes are that narrow. But as an auditor, you don't necessarily know the history. You just need to, pick out any of those safety risks. Got some examples now of, I guess, some poorly worded RSA findings. So right turn bay is too narrow. That gives me nothing. I don't know which right turn bay you're talking about. I don't know what crash type you're talking about. So we definitely don't consider that as exemplary by any means. Something that's a little bit more well-rounded. The right turn bay from main road to side road is too narrow. This is a concern as it increases side swipe or rear end crash types. Also, Austroads, states that we should be doing 3.3 meter traffic lanes. That one's actually not too bad, but it lacks that kind of detail, and there's also no snip, just to clarify exactly where we're talking. So this is what we love to see, and it once again follows the formula that we spoke about before, which is explaining the crash risk, is in the red there, explaining what crash type we're concerned about, side swipe or rear end. If there's any other pertinent risk factors, so particularly if it's wet weather or it's at night, this risk may be exacerbated. And then finally in purple, if there's any standards that or guidelines that may be applicable. Issue, crash, risk factors, standards and guidelines. Really, really important that you understand that that's the process that we're following here, and will need to be kind of reiterated and rejigged every time you do an audit finding. Alrighty. I'll have a little drink of water. I'll check in with Loretta if we've missed any questions in the Q&A.
No, we're all good. Thank you.
Very good. Must have a very switched on bunch, which is good to see. Jacket up as well. It's heating up now. All right. I'll go through some of the things road safety audit is not, just so we can clearly understand the scope of an RSA. We've already spoken that, it's not a check of compliance with standards and guidelines. It's not meant to do that. It doesn't assess the overall merits of a project. So let's say you were in the concept design or doing the business case of a road project, and you're thinking of some different design options and things like that. A road safety audit wouldn't be very good at saying, this design option is better because there's only 30 audit findings, or this one is worse because there's 100 audit findings or something like that. It's not meant for that purpose. So it's not very good for that comparative tool. Another tool within this space, it's referred to as a safe system assessment, is absolutely fantastic for that. So if you need that kind of comparison, or you're trying to demonstrate the merits of investing in a specific project, safe system assessment. That's the one I'd be recommending. Excuse me. It's not a substitute for any of your QA, quality control checks, design checks that you need to do as part of a design process. It's not meant to be that at all. It's not a crash investigation. So I already spoke about, you don't actually need to have crash history before you do an RSA. You don't need to have access to that at all. So it shouldn't be seen as a requirement as part of that process. It's not an ongoing, repetitive inspection process or anything like that. So it's not just a maintenance regime or anything like that, or anything to do with like other signs starting to deteriorate now and we should start replacing them. You might pick that up within an RSA, but it's not the best use of this tool. It's not something that only needs to be applied to high cost projects. You can do, I did an RSA last year on a installation of a give way sign in a residential area at a Y intersection. So that was, I'm going to say, $600 to install that sign. But they got an RSA. This council got an RSA completed for that and engaged Safe System Solutions to complete that. Because although it's very, very low cost, this specific area, because it is a Y intersection and residents are having priority change, they were very concerned about how residents may react with that change, and they wanted that kind of independent advice to what we can do to ensure that we're not having, adverse reactions there. So it's not only high cost projects, anything could be audited. It's always got to do with safety issues. So if it's not related to safety, then it won't be included within the report. I certainly know I've audited my fair share of projects where I feel like it is not a good project. It's not going to improve safety. It may be going to reduce congestion a little bit. But it's not my job as an auditor to be like, you shouldn't be putting money into this project because this is not worth, our tax money. It's no way appropriate to mention that at all. You're solely there for your safety focus. It's also not focused on the construction aspect of the delivery of the projects. So, how is plant going to be able to access the site and where a traffic controller is going to stand and things like that? That's not completed as part of a road safety audit. That would be other, SWIMs and JSAs and other site inspection type records to pick up on those types of risks. Similar with the last point there. You can actually do a road safety audit of a traffic management plan, but it's not going to be like, is this meeting the code? Is this exactly installed, as per our requirements with this correct taper and the correct number of cones and things like that? It'd be more holistic of, if I shut down this traffic lane, where may vehicles go? Where will pedestrians go? If I'm closing down a bike lane, what does that mean for the cycling traffic? Are they forced to ride on road, or they got to go into the footpath, etc.? So you can do a road safety audit on traffic management plans, but it's not that just like checklist. A road safety auditor is a problem finder. If you're able to solve the problem, that's great. If you know recommendations and treatments and you've worked on other projects and you've got experience and you can be like, I reckon you could do this. This is going to help you. By all means, that is an added benefit, but it's not the primary role of the auditor. You may not know how to resolve this as an issue, and that's okay. You're welcome to, I'd say first maybe try and get in touch with peers who maybe have experience within that space to see if there's anything you can offer there. But if you don't know a resolution, you can just say in your recommendations, consider investigating this issue further, perhaps engaging a specialist, because I'll just give you an example. If maybe there is a risk of 1 in 100-year floods occurring at a specific, area of an intersection, and there's going to be ponding water and things like that, you may know that that is a risk. You may be concerned about aquaplaning and lack of friction issues for vehicles or motorcycle riders in that area. Maybe you recommend, well, can we just build bigger pits and pipes and things like that? But you can also just be like, you know what, consider engaging a drainage specialist to mitigate this as a risk here. So you don't need to know the answers to everything. Got this little diagram here. I'm just going to get them all up so we can have a look at them, which is a bit of a Venn diagram to show how different frameworks fit within each other. So we've got a road safety audit here, this circle here. There is an overlap with a safe system assessment. That's the topic that I brought up before, which is very, very useful when you're comparing design options, or you're saying, going from existing conditions to the design, what are the merits in doing this? What are the safe system implications? SSA is very, very good at that, but you can see there's a bit of an overlap there, but there's a lot of difference between those as well. Design review, that's more of the standards and guidelines checks and things like that. Definitely has a safety element to it, but you would say a lot of that checks is for compliance and things like that. A DDA audit, once again, that has got quite a focus on safety. DDA is Disability Discrimination Act, so just ensuring people with mobility issues or people with low or no vision can safely access that space and things like that. Separate to a road safety audit. You don't want to really combine those two things because you'd have different providers being able to complete that. So if we were to do a DDA at Safe System Solutions, we would actually just engage someone that can really identify, well, what are the risks here of being in a wheelchair, because it's not really our specialty or a skill set to be able to comment on those types of things. The final one up here is safety in design. That one's more to do with, well, once this design is actually commissioned and it's good to go, how is that actually going to be operationalized and how will that be maintained? So have you got spaces for maintenance crews to be able to access and things like that? Or just making sure that that asset can be safely managed. just wanted to highlight this, that, there are lots and different checks and balances across a project life cycle. You're probably going to see lots of these different terms, but they've all got their own, focus. They've all got their own specific function, and one is not better, or one is not, conducive to, I can only do this one, and then that will mean all of my other checks are done. They absolutely all have their own valid uses. So what can be audited? Well, you could basically audit anything. You could audit very, very large infrastructure, very minor infrastructure, as I talked about, things in urban environments or rural environments, construction sites, temporary traffic management setups, shared paths, projects that involve, duplicating a carriageway, things that are innovative, things that haven't been tested before. You can complete a road safety audit on there. You can do existing conditions, that's completely fine. But anything that interacts with a road or road-related area is certainly up for a road safety audit. I've got this example here, which I'm not going to spend too much time on. Just looking at the time here. But this is similar to what I started off today, talking about the risk of the see-through effect. And this was prior to any works occurring. So there was a project here where the local council wanted to seal that part of the carriageway on the right-hand side there. So they wanted to seal that. And got a road safety audit completed for this. And this is eventually what the project looked like. Now, the issue with sealing that, I don't know how that just zoomed in. That was weird. The issue with sealing this area is you've got that see-through effect occurring now. Because prior you had this, unsealed network. So it was pretty obvious that you were coming up to an intersection because things did not continue. Things look very, very different. Out on the ground, though, this is what you're looking at. So you've just got a stop sign. I mean, they are duplicated. You've got the stop lines there. But it very, very much looks like this road continues. And that's also because of the row of trees that I spoke about before and the utility poles that are just continuing through there. So a road safety audit may pick that up during the design and say, well, if you are proposing to seal this, you're increasing the risk of that see-through effect, where vehicles will just head straight through this intersection and fail to yield. That's just another photo on the approach there. All right, so I'm going to spend a bit of time now just going through some of the areas where you might be conducting a road safety audit. When you may be doing the RSA, you could be doing it right at the start, so during feasibility, and you might get something that looks like this, kind of like a high level, this is what we're proposing for our bypass of a town or something like that. You could very well do a road safety audit on exactly this. What you'd be considering as part of that audit was, well, where is this going to be tying into the existing network? Where are the interchanges? How will pedestrian connectivity be maintained, etc., etc. Quite high level. Once you get more detail, though, and you've actually got plans and things like that, so preliminary concept design, that's when you can get a bit more meat in your audit findings. You can talk about traffic lane widths, you can talk about sightline restrictions, circulating area, even like material use and things like that. Once you have a flick through the detailed design stuff, this is really where I encourage you to reach out to designers that are actually incredibly competent within this sphere, because they can look at long plans and just flick through sheets and be able to pick up anything that looks a little bit too steep or too narrow, and be quite efficient at that. So once again, just reiterate, you're not expected to know every single element of traffic engineering. You would just aim to include a team that can offer that skill. So detailed design, super common. Time to conduct road safety audits. A common road safety audit finding, you could also do this during existing conditions, is having culvert end walls. They're just like a vertical face. It's not dissimilar to just having a brick wall being installed there. And instead recommending for the use of drivable end walls. So your jurisdictions may have specific geometric requirements for what those drivable end wall treatments look like, but quite a common one to pick up if you're working in rural environments. You may actually have them installed in incorrect directions and things like that. So that's what that one there was mentioning. I'll skip over this one. I already spoke about the construction, temporary traffic management audits as well. I'll go through that one as well. These ones are quite rare. You don't often get the pre-opening RSA done. This is basically as they're about to cut the rope and let live traffic drive on this, conduct a road safety audit. You'd probably just be walking through this one. You'd be looking at, the barrier systems, whether all the bolts are being tightened up, whether the overlapping is the correct direction, things like that. So that can get quite detailed as well, but probably not the most common RSA to be undertaking. After things have just been installed, though, and it is live, that is pretty common. Anyone in the chat want to guess what's wrong with this image, or what you might have included as a road safety audit finding for this site? No one yet? People turning right from the left lane and through from the right. Yes, hang on. So this one here, if you were turning right there, that would conflict with that through movement. So what's actually occurred here is the line marking company has just put their stencil back to front. So that one should be left and through. That's just gone the wrong way and happened to got painted. That you hope you don't see that one too much. You hope your line marker would pick that one up. But yeah, could be an issue there. Existing conditions. So that's where no design is actually proposed. Instead, you just got to look at given environments and, pick out any road safety risks. Also quite a common time to conduct RSAs. The last one is actually conducting thematic audits. And the term thematic just means mode specific. So you could have a bicycle audit. That's me on the left there, doing a cycling audit. So actually riding my bike to get this perspective of the other riders within that area. You could have a walking audit. That could also include people in wheelchairs and things like that, as well as a motorcycle audit. So the most critical thing about thematic audits is you are actually including members of that mode as part of the audit team. So you can't do a cycling audit in a passenger vehicle. It's just not a good use of anyone's time. You're not going to be able to get the risks associated with that mode if you're not using that mode. So make sure that if you are proposing any of these thematic audits, that you've got a team that is equipped to be able to conduct that with the mode in mind. All right, I got through all the content, which is excellent. My voice is a little tired though. So we do have an assignment at the end of today, which Loretta is going to run through, I believe.
I will, thank you. I'm going to share my screen, and that way I can show you through the LMS. So can you see my screen now?
I can.
Excellent, thank you. All right, so as most of you have already logged in to the learning management system. So, oh, sorry, once you log in, it'll take you to a dashboard and you may have just one course, today's course, of course, or multiple courses like I have. But we are looking at road safety audit for April. I've got quite a few in there. So road safety audit, April. I'm feeling like it's weird being April already. Anyway, all right, so you'll get to this page here, and basically the way the LMS works, you're working down the page. So welcome page, as I mentioned, a lot of you have already introduced yourself, so thank you. There's some pre-course content here. You can watch that video. A lot of resources in here. So once you click in documents and resources, it'll take you to a few PDFs that you can read through, which will help you sort of get through a lot of your assignments, or Max or Ken may refer to these documents throughout the sessions. Course information, once you click on there, that'll give you the agenda in case you sort of forget what the timeline is, but the times are also in each module as well. As you work down, module 2, as we know, will be on Wednesday, so it'll give you the date and the time there. So going into module 1, so there are some additional videos that you can read through. As I mentioned earlier, the PDF of the slides and another video in there. So clicking through, which will help you get through the course. So I've got 2 tasks for today's module. So as Max mentioned, there's the research topic, which I'll run through, and there is a quiz. So with the quiz, simply clicking on there and attempting the quiz and answering the questions. So there is that Wally quiz at the end as well. So working your way through the quiz and then submitting that or attempting that at the end. I'll just go back and we'll go back to the research topic. So for this assignment, it is basically where you have to create like some information or a fact sheet. So I'm going to randomly allocate you a topic. And what you'll need to do is create something from the list there, like a fact sheet, a cartoon, a video, TikTok if you want, podcast, or an audio file. So obviously road safety related, but yeah, researching that topic and giving us some information on that. So you can be creative, technically sound, and engaging. And if once they're all marked, you may win a prize if you do meet one of those criteria and are the best in the group. There's an additional video which will help you sort of understand what you need to do, or an example of. Basically, I'm going to share something now. So I'm going to generate topics. So everyone's names are listed here. And I'm going to just run through, and Max, you can tell me when to stop. I'm generating topic.
Stop.
All right, so that's it. That's what we've got. So what I will do is, I'm just going to paste that down so that they're saved. What I will do is send you this document via email. So after this, I will send you this document via email. I'll also create a list in here as well, just in case you can't find the email. So your topic, look for your name and your topic, and you must complete that by Wednesday. So Wednesday, 5 p.m. Our next session is on Wednesday at 10 a.m. Australian Eastern Standard Time. But I think that's it. Max, did you want to add anything to that research topic assignment?
Just submitting it as well.
Oh, of course. How did I forget that? So once you've created your file, whether it's a video, fact sheet, etc., save it, and then you click on Add Submission. So once you click on Add Submission, it's pretty simple system to use. You can either find it or just drag and drop into this box and save the changes. So that's all you'll need to do to submit by Wednesday if you can, is the best time, because we do have graders or markers that will be marking these assignments so that we can run through those during module 3 as well. So that's it. Anything else?
Perfect. Thank you very much, Loretta, and thanks everyone for contributions today. I look forward to seeing you a little bit early on Wednesday for trivia, and yeah, getting stuck into the next module. Hope you all have a lovely day.
Thank you. Bye.